for the months ahead, and also discuss some of the issues and regulations facing the charter industry. We'll then move on to Andy, who's going to give us a bit of a health and safety update, because obviously this is going to become a really important topic as we move into the yachting season post-lockdown, hopefully. And then Yann and Nicolas are going to give us some specific updates on the port regulations in the Mediterranean and some travel regulations for crew who are trying to get in and out of ports. Sam's going to give us a bit of an update on travel regulations that are specific to obviously South African crew, but also I think this will apply to a lot of non-EU crew who are trying to get into the EU for work. And then lastly, hopefully we'll have Caitlin joining us from Iswan. I can see she still hasn't joined, but Caitlin should give us an update on the crew mental health services that are available at the moment. And then lastly, we'll just end off with some questions. So if everyone wants to just pop their questions in the chat, we'll make a note of those and then we'll run through them at the end. So I am going to try and keep to the schedule. So I'll move quickly on to Kim, who's going to give us an update on the situation in France and Italy.
Thanks, Stacey. So I just want to stress the fact that the update I'm going to give is based on what has been said in the last few days, and governments are monitoring the situation, which can evolve and change depending on the circumstances. So starting from Italy, the Prime Minister announced the last decree for phase 2 on Sunday. Starting from May 4th, which is next Monday, people within the region have a new item amongst the essential needs, which is visiting relatives. So basically, the travel certificates will be updated, and when people want to visit their relatives, they'll have to wear masks. Traveling outside your own region won't be allowed unless it's for essential needs. So that hasn't changed, but it may change starting from May 18th. In fact, every region must give a daily report to the government and the scientific committee, and every region will be evaluated. And if the criteria are satisfied, traveling can be allowed. If they aren't, the borders have to remain closed. But it's also up to the governments of each region to actually decide if they want to open the region borders. All factories and construction work will resume. From May 18th, shops will be allowed to open with some restrictions in place. We have to wait for June 1st for bars and restaurants, hairdressers, and estheticians to open. They haven't determined the restrictions yet, so they are guessing perhaps there will be a limit of 50% of their capacity. In the meantime, takeaway from restaurants is accepted. Parks will reopen and outdoor individual sports are allowed, and there will be no more limit on the distance from home. And from May 18th, team sports will resume as well. There's still no date for swimming pools, gyms, sports centers, and wellness centers. Masks will be compulsory on public transport for now, and schools will reopen only in September. Now, BWA, so Yann will probably give an update about yachting and ports, but just briefly, an update from the region of Liguria, because every region in Italy has slightly different regulations at the moment. But Liguria, for instance, has opened their shipyards recently, and the local associations and the mayor of Genoa are pushing to allow access to private boats so that owners and crew can resume their work and go back and use the boats to navigate along the coast, and not just to go to the shipyard, but also for pleasure. And also reopen all nautical services that are related to pleasure yachting. All these measures can be taken back if the number of infections increases and deaths starts rising again. About France, on last Tuesday, the Prime Minister has presented the government strategy to the National Assembly. And this is a general framework, so each department is currently being evaluated and will predict measures to implement in each area. So he said that if there are signs again that show that something changes between now and May 11th, these instructions may change. But in general, there won't be any more travel certificates, so you will be able to go out without having your paper certificate anymore unless you're traveling for more than 100 kilometers from home. Gatherings will be allowed for up to 10 people and shops will reopen. Outdoor activities will be allowed. Again, it's only individual activities, no sports that are with teams or with contact are allowed. Parks will reopen in certain departments. Beaches will remain closed at least until June 1st. And they haven't given an update about bars and restaurants and cafes or traveling, but probably that's because each department will have a different regulation based on what I said earlier. Working from home remains for the next 3 weeks at least. And masks are again obligatory on public transport. And there will be a gradual reopening of nurseries and primary schools on a voluntary basis with strict sanitary limitations and conditions. And markets have already reopened. Last update is about Monaco, which will also end its lockdown on May 4th, and it will be in 3 phases. The first phase will be the one where masks are strongly advised and they are compulsory on public transport. We will be free to circulate in Monaco and go back to work. Shops will reopen with strict health measures. Hairdressers and beauty salons will be open, but appointment-based only. And private yachts will be allowed to circulate during the day from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. under some limitations though. Then on May 11th, there will be a phase 2, in which schools will reopen, no nurseries though. And finally, depending on the outcome on the first 2 phases, there will be a phase 3, which is June 1st, and all the other non-essential needs related shops or like bars, restaurants, beaches, gyms, and swimming pools will reopen. And that's it for now.
Brilliant, thanks, Kim. And I think it's probably worth echoing a few of the points that you made there. And I think that's, a lot of people, we're based in France, well, I'm based in France, and a lot of people are watching that May 11th date very closely, hoping that we do end lockdown. But then what the Prime Minister did say here is that it will also be a phased approach, looking until the 2nd of June, just to see how the figures go. So I think even though lockdown will be over, obviously borders will still be closed. So we'll still be monitoring the situation very closely here, just to see how it's going to affect the opening of restaurants, hotels, and obviously opening of the borders so that guests and crew can fly in. Just to move over to Seb quickly, because our time slot is going on. Seb, can you just give us an update on what's been happening in Palma regarding the lockdown and any restrictions that have changed since we last hosted our webinar?
Sure. In Balearic Islands, the total number of confirmed cases is 1,879 and fatalities reached 185. But the good news is that another 30 COVID-19 patients have been discharged from care on Tuesday, which means 1,196 have now beaten the virus. The incidence of contagion has decreased again, and it is one of the lowest ratios in entire Spain. However, state of alarm presently until 11th of May, and travel restrictions extended to 15th of May, sorry. On Tuesday evening, Prime Minister Sanchez set out the Spanish government's plan for de-escalation of coronavirus restrictions. He said, so it will be different according to each and every region. There will be a gradual recovery by phases, for which the unit will be province or an island. There will be no movement between provinces and islands. In the best case, the transition will have a minimum duration of 6 weeks and total of 4 phases. By the end of June, we will be at a situation of the new normality. Here in Balearics, Palma de Mallorca opened its beaches and the selection of its parks last Sunday, April 26th. And the news was announced by Palma City Council and will allow children up to 14 years old to enjoy open spaces. And as part of phase 0, short walks and individual sporting activities will be allowed starting on this Tuesday, May 2nd. And all provinces that meet the requirements will move to phase 1 on May 11, except for 3 islands in Canaries and the Balearic Island Formentera, where phase 1 begins on May 4th as an exception. So here in Palma on May 11th, small businesses will reopen. Bars and restaurants will be able to reopen their terraces with no more than 30% occupation. Hotels and other tourist accommodation can reopen, excluding common areas. And shops and other service providers will set aside preferential times for customers aged over 65 to visit. Travel in Europe still remains limited to repatriation for nationals and residents. There are, however, exceptions for key workers, such as transportation workers, including seafarers, or those traveling for reasons of safety or emergency. Inbound travelers without prior authorization from the Spanish authorities may be denied boarding in the country of origin, while local countries may yet deny departure, depending on local restrictions and criteria for travel. Palma Airport is closed. Only 2 flights per day to Barcelona and Madrid, and only documented residents can fly to Balearics. Authorization is necessary for any non-resident. That's why we highly recommend to all crew members to contact agents and authorities prior traveling during this time. So these are the latest updates.
Great, thank you, Seb. And I think, yeah, just to echo on that point, that's obviously why we've got BWA Yachting on the webinar today, because they're going to discuss some of the specifics. And I know, Sam, you can discuss some of the regulations as well that crew need who are traveling. Obviously, crew are deemed as key workers because they're seafarers. So provided that you have the right documentation, you should be able to travel into your vessel at the moment. However, this is very much depending on the ports and the countries that you're coming from and obviously going to. So Yann and Nicolas will cover that a little bit later. But what we'll do is we'll quickly move over to Kim. Kim, do you have any updates from the MCA regarding certification and exams?
Yes, we've got an update from the MCA about NOEs. So we've been informed that they are receiving NOE applications by email. This means that you can submit your NOE application to the deck or engineering department by email, provided that you attach your form completely filled in and all the required documents. That means that you need to scan every single document, even the TRB, in all parts. It must be complete. And they accept simple copies, so they don't need to be certified. About the proof of sea time, if you haven't updated your SRB before the lockdown, so you don't have an updated copy with the required sea time, when applying, you can CC us in your email to the MCA and we will follow up with the proof of sea time. Be careful though that they are just accepting NOE applications. They are not actually processing them. So that means that you won't receive an NOE. The MCA will give us further updates probably next week. But for now, if people want to apply and they need to get their sea time verified, they should know that the PYA is working. So even though we're working from home, they can get their sea time verified they can just upload their testimonials and we will process them. And that's it for now.
Brilliant. And yeah, I mean, that's so obviously now that it's downtime for a lot of crew are thinking of how they can do online training or get their certification in order. So it's probably a good moment to move over to John Wyborn from Bluewater Yachting. So John, can you just tell us a little bit more about, in terms of training, where do you sort of see things going over the next sort of couple of weeks and months? Obviously right now, we just don't know, and the situation is evolving day by day. But from your perspective, where is crew training at the moment?
As far as I'm aware, can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Great. As far as I'm aware, there aren't any yacht courses being delivered at the moment. I think all of the yacht training providers are working hard to get their online course content up and running, and we're no exception. I know that JPMA up in the northwest of England, I know that they've announced recently that they've got that they're going to do some online tuition. I don't exactly know how, possibly through Zoom, I'm not sure, and they're waiting for final MCA approval to be able to do that. As far as the UK nautical colleges are concerned, they've always had fairly advanced student portals. So I know that Merchant Navy cadets, for example, are being taught as we speak online by the lecturers. So the upshot of all this is that the MCA have taken a much more flexible and open-minded approach to the whole concept of online learning, and I think this is actually a watershed for the whole training industry. And I think there may be some good things that come out of it. The more I get into the online courses that we've been working on at Bluewater, the more I realise that actually for some courses the online delivery is better than cramming people in a classroom and forcing information in their heads for 5 days and then giving them a test. Actually, for some courses, it's an improvement to do it online, and that's I'm beginning to realise that more and more. So that's something I think that is changing, which will not go back. I see Tristan Mortlock sent me a question concerning the way that how will it work where if a crew member has passed all of the training requirements for a certificate, they passed all their courses, they passed their oral, but a couple of their modules are out of date. How will that be handled? I don't know the final answer to that, but I'm fairly confident that we may know this next week, that the MCA will issue a temporary COC. They've done this in not exactly the same situation, but in analogous situations, a temporary 6-month COC. I don't know that for sure, but I'm hopeful that that will be the outcome. And I know that the chief examiner is actively considering this at the moment. So that's an indication of how flexible they're being. Another indication is that I know that they've done an experiment with online oral exams. They did it for an engineering candidate, and I believe if they haven't done it already, they're about to do it for a deck candidate for the Merchant Navy. But actually that could be a real game changer for us, because if we can do orals via Zoom, it means that they'll be much more available. It means that there'll be nothing to stop you doing your oral exam if you're in the Seychelles. And of course, for all the guys in the States where the examiners go across there twice a year and it costs quite a lot of money, it'll really open that side of it up. So I don't know how that's going to work yet, because they're still playing around with it, but I am very hopeful that this will actually be a permanent change, one which will benefit all of us going forward. So it's not all doom and gloom, but as far as training is concerned in France, I really don't know when we're going to be able to get training running again, because I don't know the details. Never mind the Prime Minister made a statement in France on Tuesday, but it's the devil's in the detail. We need to know how that's going to be interpreted. If students have got to wear masks all day in the classroom, that's not going to work. If the 2-meter separation is going to be applied, which I imagine it will be, that will affect how many students we can get in the classroom. So all these variables make it very difficult for us to determine whether we're going to get any training running this side of the season. I think that Ellie, who manages our Palmer operation, I think she's pretty much resigned to restarting training in the Balearics as of September. But we haven't made that decision in France yet. But we're going to look at the detail of how things are implemented and make it over the next over the next week or so, I think. So that's pretty much it on the training side.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, John. I mean, I understand that, like you say, there's so many details involved, and obviously we need to hear the details from the individual governments on what is required from a health and safety standpoint, and then that will obviously determine how the training providers move ahead and obviously make training available within those regulations. And as far as I understand, for those people whose certification is expiring that need to take additional training, I think the MCA has catered for the situation and is allowing extensions. I know a lot of the French certification bodies are also allowing that leeway. So I think we've provided some detail on that on our website. But yeah, I think, as you say, I think health and safety is going to definitely determine how not only the training is rolled out, but how the industry is going to operate this season, and when it's going to start and how it's going to operate. So what I'll do is I'll just move on to my next question for you, John, as you are a member of the you're a member of the board on MEBA, and that's just really with regards to health and safety guidance. You know, what is the charter industry looking at the moment? Obviously, when it comes to private yachts, that will just be determined by the owner what type of health and safety they want to take on board. But in order for charter yachts to obviously operate, they need to be mindful and obviously need to stick in line with what if you're operating off French shores and waters, you're going to have to look what the French government has put in place, and in Spain or Italy or wherever you are. Has there, have there been anything that the charter industry is currently discussing to help charter boats handle the health and safety regulations that might be coming our way?
I know that all of the yacht charter companies and the management companies have been talking to each other and sharing ideas. And at MEBA, we've been talking about what we can do to facilitate this and make it helpful. It's tricky for the association to say, okay, everyone, this is how you're going to do it, because actually this has never happened before. You know, we're actually we're working things out from first principles. And there are so many different aspects of it we have to take into account. You know, we're not doctors, so we have to listen to the advice of the public health authorities. And as you've already said, the opinions of the public health authorities vary from country to country. So that's all got to be taken into account. So I think what we've got to do as an association, which we're already doing, is to foster channels of communication between the management companies and the charter companies as much as possible, so that everybody's sharing ideas and sharing solutions. If somebody thinks of a unique solution for a particular problem, that actually that becomes more broadly available. I think that is at this stage what we need to be doing. As it goes forward, as things begin to crystallize, it may be that we can actually come out with some sort of statement. But at the moment, it's really all too new, and it's the sands are shifting so much. It's hard to make a sort of a permanent document. All I think we can do is share ideas, and that's very much what we're engaged in doing.
Definitely, and I think this is one of the reasons why we wanted to host this webinar and start discussing these issues, because I think, as you know, a lot of us have just been waiting for those lockdown dates to end. But as we move past the lockdown dates, we're going to be in a new realm where we're going to have to start thinking about how do we start operating again within the regulations that are obviously provided to us by the local authorities. I know here in France, a lot of the districts are leaving it to the local councils to deal with the specifics of how regulations are taken on board. I'm following the local mayor here and seeing how they moving ahead with it in rolling out regulations in restaurants and so forth. So I think, I think we just really have to see how it's rolled out on a national level to see how the charter industry is going to have to move ahead with that. But Andy, who's our CEO, I know, Andy, you've been looking at specifically what health and safety measures yacht crew might be facing once the lockdown is over. And I think already there's a few sort of things that are starting to be announced, certainly for seafarers as a whole. Andy, can you just tell us a little bit about, some of the regulations that we might be facing and the types of things that we need to be thinking about as we approach the season ahead?
Yeah, Stacey, yeah. My main message to everybody is, frankly, keep calm and carry on, because fortunately we're actually in a profession where we are regulated already for things like quarantine. We're operating on vessels which, by nature of the environment, we have to have a risk-assessed approach to everything that we do. And I would say to people, just think about COVID as yet another risk, and use that same methodology that you use for everything else you do in the environment to impose and use control measures, you know, which is the way we all should be operating. What's happened so far is the governments have imposed a black and white control measure, but what you're starting to see now is the government's looking at ways to transfer the responsibility of those control measures from government back to local authorities and right down to individual vessels. So the responsibilities will be shifting onto management companies and masters and down onto crew about the way that you deal with life working in the COVID environment. And, you know, let's all be honest about it. We could be spending some considerable time, possibly years, working with restrictions around COVID, which will ebb and flow as we go forward. So as I said, in the maritime environment, I mean, when you've done your certificates, you're all happy with quarantine and the regulations that go with it. The mere fact that we, as seafarers, have to have ENG1s because it's a requirement under SCCW, but it's also a requirement under sort of port health regulations. The fact that you have to produce a maritime declaration of health if you're coming in from an international voyage in case you've picked up something or someone on board who's been sick. So the port health authorities can make an assessment as whether that person needs to come off the vessel's quarantined. Those regulations are all in place and they persist. Ships have ship sanitation certificates, which is all again part of the structure that's already there and all working. And the maritime environment has been practicing these skills and these regulations for many, many years, probably invented them. What you've seen more recently is a couple of initiatives. As these documents are on the PYA website, will be on our media. There was a joint statement letter came out on the 22nd of April, co-signed by the IMO and the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization does have a role to play in designating areas where there are problems. So going back, Ebola and places, areas like that would have been, ships visiting places like that would have already been under special measures if they've been trading into those areas. So now you can understand the World Health Organization is obviously very involved. So that letter effectively was asking governments to be aware that there's two aspects: medical certificates, ENG1s for seafarers. Under current regulations, if it expires on a voyage, you've then got about 3 months to get it sorted out if it's going over an expiry date. Normally that's done at the next port of call. What they're obviously running into in the commercial shipping world is the fact that the people normally come down on board to carry out medical inspections are unable to because of lockdown. So they're asking governments to actually facilitate that by supplying people with the right PPE to come down on board ships. In yachting, we tend to go off the ship to designated doctors, so we'll be looking to see priority given to seafarers to be able to renew their ENG1s, and this letter does that. The other thing it's also asking is extension of sanitation certificates for ships as well. So that letter came out. There's also a very useful second letter which came out between the IMO but also the ILO on travel certification for seafarers, and they actually produced a template for companies to create to be given to their seafarers if they're traveling internationally. And I'm sure my colleagues and agents will talk a bit more about that, because I think we're going to find that the bureaucracy will increase if you are actually traveling in and out of on international trips, particularly outside the Schengen area, will have a particular element to it. Again, that template and that document is available on the PYA website and in other places. We've got Caitlin from Iswan. Iswan also have I'll just give it a quick, have a very good brochure called Safe Travel, which has been around for a while. I would suggest that you have a look at that. It's got some pretty sensible, common sense advice in it. So once again, the information's out there. At the moment, the ports are closed for non-commercial vessels. Each government is making its own derogations on that. As PYA, we're putting our shoulder to the wheel, particularly in the Paca region, to see what sort of latitudes can be given to get a bit of movement going. Already, there is possible for vessels to transit to and from commercial ports for repair work. So that is doable. But at the moment, there's no unrestricted use of pleasure vessels. I think Monaco this week has allowed its pleasure vessels actually based in Monaco to go out and come back in a day without any restrictions. So that's starting to open things up. So we're feeling quite positive that you're going to see the 1% plus 1% change as we go forward. And to be fair to the officials and governments, all those involved, all the stakeholders involved, we're all going to have to work together to work out what is sensible and how things go forward. As I say, I think let's be positive about it. I think I'm starting to see and feel that things are on the move now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, as you said, I think a lot of the local ports will certainly be looking into, you know, putting in place certain restrictions. As you say, Monaco is allowing vessels to go on day trips. So we might see that vessels might be allowed just to travel within the vicinity, you know, of certain ports. And then as the situation evolves, this may extend further. But obviously right now we're still waiting to hear. Just on the topic of ports, I will move over to Yann and Nicolas. I'm not too sure which of you want to make a start, but can you tell us a little bit more about what regulations are in place across the Mediterranean as a whole, and what some of the major ports really that the yachting industry is focused around? And secondly, have you been assisting a lot of crew from non-EU countries traveling into ports? So those are crew on rotation or crew who already got jobs who wanting to travel in. Has that been possible? So yeah, just over to you guys.
Thanks, Stacey, and thanks PYA for the invitation. So first of all, I would like to let you know that the rules I'm going to mention are the latest one, but it remains very tricky subject. The thing is that even in the same country, rules could change region from region. That's the first thing. Second thing is that any regulation could change daily. So everything I'm going to tell you now might change even tomorrow. So it's very important to always double check any regulation before taking any decision. And then last thing is that every yacht and crew members are unique, and every case has to be treated case by case. So I mean that's why general regulation has to be checked and make sure that it can be applied correctly to your crew or your yachts. I'm going to start with Spain. So the government, as you mentioned, has announced an ease of the lockdown, and we hope that in the next 8 weeks we're going to get back to some kind of normality. As we speak, all the ports in mainland Spain are open to yachts, such as shipyards. For the Balearics, the situation is slightly different. Ibiza and Menorca are closed, but also now, as we speak, Mallorca is open for yachts with confirmed bookings and with a complex protocol of entry. So if you want to go to shipyard, but even in Marina, it's potentially possible to get in. Once in Spain, there is no legal compulsory quarantine if you have no declared case of coronavirus on board, of course. The pre-arrival protocol is more strict than before, and the authority require additional documents such as the Maritime Health Declaration, and if you are commercial, the Ship Sanitation Certificate. If for any reason your Ship Sanitation Certificate expired during the lockdown, you could still be accepted. I mean, the authorities can understand that you could not renew it during the lockdown. I would also like to mention that if you go to a shipyard, sometimes the shipyards have their own internal protocol that is even more strict than the domestic rules. So it's very important to always double check with the shipyard what are the rules to be followed, because it could be, as I was mentioning, a bit more complex over there. Regarding crew members in Spain, so crew members can join and leave the yachts. Yesterday, even the Spanish government announced a new order making easier for professional seafarers of all nationalities to travel to from Spain. There is no, as we speak, there is no problem to get transit visa. There is no problem to get stamp in or stamp out for your Schengen visa. Upon arrival, crew members have to be put in quarantine for 14 days, either on board, if you can prove that you can isolate your crew member from the rest of the crew, or if it's not possible, it has to be done in an apartment. And as BWA, we have successfully assisted in the past 2 weeks over 30 crew members from all nationalities and different vessels to depart and rejoin in all the country. For France, as we speak, the ports are officially closed and navigation is forbidden. However, departure from French port are possible upon simple authorization. You can go to shipyard if you justify some works. That's why it's becoming a bit tricky, because I mean, even if ports are officially closed in the mainland of France, you could potentially, with prior an authorization from the ports, get in if you justify a sum above contract. And it's important to have a contract and not only a booking. But even if you have it, then after, the ports has the right to deny the access. So it's a bit up to the port to decide in that specific case. For Corsica, I mean, it's quite easy. It's closed, so there is no possibility to get in as we speak. For the crew movement in France, so it's possible. As you were mentioning it a bit earlier, I mean, the administration document, the administration to get in is heavier. You have to justify the reason of your movement. I mean, for those who live in France, you know that you've got the French movement form justifying why you're leaving home. So there's the same ID for crew that needs to reach a boat. I mean, they have to fill this document explaining that they are reaching their workplace. In fact, the main challenge is not so much to get the authorization, is more to get a flight from, if you are out of the EU specifically, to be able to get into your destination. And that's why we are in general advised to get in touch with travel agency, which can arrange seafarer tickets, which make it simpler. If you have an expired Schengen visa, we can do transit visa, either from ship to ship if you are changing work, or even if you have to leave the boat to go back to your hometown, your home country. For crew joining the yacht, there is no legal obligation to be put in quarantine when you join the boat in France. It's up to the captain. However, we advise that you put the crew in confined environment for 48 hours, organize a test, and you advise accordingly. For Monaco, things are slightly different, and you are mentioning indeed that ports are allowing boats to get in and out, but as far as we understood is for only daily boats that have permanent berth in Monaco and that just want to go out and in the Monégasque water. For the crew movement, it's possible, but you must present a medical certificate mentioning the absence of any symptoms. The crew member will be placed then in quarantine on board on isolation. At the end of the 14 days of isolation, there will be a new medical certificate which will be required to validate the lifting of the quarantine measure. The boat will be placed in strict quarantine upon the arrival of the crew member, unless the boat allows the person to be isolated from the rest of the crew. So that's the same idea. Either you make sure that the crew has no contact that cannot affect all your boat, or you have to isolate him somewhere else, like in an apartment. And then after the crew arrived, you will have to send a maritime declaration of health in the 48 hours to the local authorities. For Italy, so first of all, I mean, at the beginning of the webinar, I think it's Kim that mentioned that in fact in Italy it's quite tricky because every region has their own interpretation. So it's quite complicated. And again, I'm insisting on the case-by-case scenario. To give you a general idea is that despite the fact that the borders are closed, yachts can arrive in ports and shipyards following sanitary rules. Yachts have to get in touch with the sanitary authorization, answer an amount of questions, and if the declaration respects the rules, the yachts have, and if the yacht has a confirmed booking, then you can potentially join your berth or the shipyard. The yacht will most likely be under quarantine after the procedure of the sanitary authorities. And then, so not upon arrival, but the next day after arrival, the sanitary authorities will come on board to make some check of the situation and make sure that the yacht is respecting the rules. If the yacht is in shipyard, again, I would like to insist on the fact that we have some case of shipyards that are very strict protocol. So again, I would like to insist on the fact that you always need to double check with them. And also, as I was suggesting, inter-regional movement, I mean, as I was suggesting that every region has their own rules, inter-regional movement inside Italy are quite complicated, and it's even sometimes easier to go or come from another country than to move inside Italy. For the crew, like in France, the main challenge is to find a flight. Crew can join the yacht following the maritime immigration police procedure. So you have, again, a self-declaration document like in France to justify your movement. Why are you coming in Italy, and also to justify that you are joining a yacht. Once the crew is on the yachts, again, the rules change region per region. For instance, in Tuscany, crew will have to be put in quarantine for 14 days, either on board or in an apartment. This is a compulsory isolation for Tuscany, and for instance, it's not the case in Liguria, where it's only a recommendation. You have to have a valid Schengen visa to join or to leave the boat. If your visa is expired, it will be complicated because all the transit visa procedure are currently suspended in Italy. For disembarkation with a valid Schengen visa, so there is no problem for the mainland. However, there was a case at the beginning of the week where a captain wanted to potentially disembark in Sicily, and if he wanted to disembark, he had to be put in strict quarantine before he leaves Italy. So, I mean, it's really, again, I would like to insist on the fact that every yacht is different. So my best advice is to check with your agent or your local contact to see how we can find the best solution for your crew and also for the yachts. So that was for Spain, for France, and for Italy. So now I'm going to do a quick overview of all the other countries. So the easy one are Malta and Tunisia because everything is closed there. Ports are closed and there is no crew movements. In Turkey and Albania, there is no crew movement allowed as well. However, yachts can come for bunker and provisioning with immediate departure after. And in Turkey, it's only if it's proven to be an emergency situation. For Greece, borders are closed for commercial yachts until 15th of May and for pleasure yachts until 4th of May. We expect an extension of this measure, which has not been given yet. For non-EU citizens, they cannot enter the country until the 15th of May, with, again, a possible date of extension. For non-EU crew members that would like to leave Greece to go back to their hometown, it could have been possible from Athens only when there was a repatriation flights available. Then we've got Gibraltar, which has been one of the only ports remaining open. All yachts can come along for bunkers, crew change, provisioning, without any specific restrictions, aside the local rules to be followed, of course. And as far as they feel no to all the question of the coronavirus health local declarations. If the yacht reply yes to one of these questions, then special condition will be enforced, such as only being allowed to come for fuel and then depart on completion. Any crew that go on cannot then come ashore. No sign of signers either. I mean, if there is a risk, of course, you will get a lot of limitation. For crew movement, and also a question, indeed, the government of Gibraltar have re-allowed crew change to take place for vessel within the anchorage or alongside with the pre-check before joining. So I know also that crew that wants to join from London or from Spain, it might be easier to join in Gibraltar than in another country of the Med. But again, it's a case-by-case scenario. I would like to finish with Croatia and Montenegro. So for Montenegro, as you may know, this week, Porto Montenegro has received permission to take incoming yachts. We expect Port of Bar, Porto Novi Marina, and Port of Kotor to follow soon. To enter, different permits are required, and the protocol is more strict if you have more than 30 crew on board. Once in the marina, yacht goes to quarantine area for a total of 28 days. During this time, crew must remain on board and report to local epidemiologists with daily temperature and any symptom any crew may have. Sorry, my video is, I'm back, I think. All boats entering Montenegro can only come with crew on board. Guests and cruising in Montenegro water are not allowed yet. For crew embarkation and disembarkation, I have to say is very, very complicated. So, I mean, if you have any question, please put in the chat or send me an email and we will then after make a tailor-made answer because it's quite tricky. And then I would like to finish with Croatia. Because as we speak, yachts can come to Croatia for shipyard period, or if they have a long-term berth, like around 2 months. Once in the country, there will be a 2 weeks isolation. However, from the 11th of May, there will be free navigation inside Croatia. And also, I just want to give you some insight and the latest rumors, because that's the idea also to give you a little trend of what's going to happen in the next weeks. According to our contacts, it's suggesting that from the 18th of May, guests and yachts could come from outside to navigate in Croatia, but only with negative test to PCR method. So again, nothing is official yet. Just to give you an idea that it seems that Croatia will be one of the first countries of the Mediterranean open for business again. So if it's the case, I just would like to remind all the commercial boats that potentially they will need the Croatian charter license to be able to pick up charter. So keep that in mind. And if you have any question, I mean, we're here to help. As we speak, there is no crew movement in Croatia, but again, everything is evolving. I mean, we are expecting some change very soon. So that's the idea. That's the overall. How can I say, the overall overview for the Mediterranean. I just want to let all our attending know that we have also information of Florida, Bahamas, the Caribbean. I mean, I would have needed an hour if I wanted to give you all the information for all these areas. So if you have any question and you need updates, you just email me or my colleague Nicolas, and we're just going to send you all the information we have. We have facilitated a lot of crew movements. So again, I mean, we're here to assist you. And if you have any question, again, for some rotation, you want to get back to your family, let us know. And again, for the provisioning or for arranging tests or arranging apartment, we can help you. So feel free to get in touch.
Thank you so much. Well, I think that, I mean, that's a lot of information. And I think that just is a real good indication of how complex the situation really is within Europe. I think there's no one size fits all answer. And I think, really, thank you for running through all those regulations. And as you say, that's just going to change day on day on day. So if you are stuck in a situation where you need advice, obviously, do reach out, because I think, your situation will be depending on the individual countries and the regulations at the time. And I think, it's positive to see that some countries are looking to open up for business, and hopefully that trend continues. I think it certainly seems that, obviously everyone is wanting to move in that direction, but obviously moving cautiously as the situation unfolds. So I will quickly move over to Caitlin from Iswan. But just before I move over to you, Caitlin, can everyone just finish answering the questions in the poll, because I'll end that poll so we can run through that at the end. Sorry, Caitlin, before I run to you, I don't know if Sam, did you want to touch on anything with regards to regulations? Sorry, I thought actually that might connect nicely to what Yann was just saying on port regulations and crew travel. I'm sure there was a lot that Yann touched on that I'm sure you've been doing with regards to helping South African yacht crew who are looking to travel at the moment. But what if there are crew out there that need specific help and support? What kind of support are you providing at the moment, and what have you found a lot of crew have been struggling with at the moment?
Hi, okay, well, thank you very much. First, I want to say that Yann is quite right when he says that the rules change daily, and what we tell you today could change tomorrow, and it's a case-by-case basis, definitely. So Yann, I 100% agree with that. Right, so what I can tell you about South Africa is there are no flights out of South Africa at the moment. It's not allowed for crew to leave South Africa. I'm currently in talks with the South African government. We've been emailing back and forth today to try and come to some sort of an agreement where we can charter a plane to have a lot of the yacht crew and other maritime workers leave the country, because obviously it's really difficult for them. They don't have any access to unemployment funds or anything like that. They need to work. So that is something that we are trying to work on for everybody's benefit. There are successful visa extensions happening in France at the moment. So if South Africans are on the ground in France and their visa has expired, or they've run out of their days and they don't have a job on a boat, therefore they are not stamped out, you can actually get a visa extension for a further 90 days, which is unheard of. Normally they don't do that. So that's great. We've been helping our crew with that, just as free of charge, just to help people out. And they're welcome to contact us if they need help with that. When the consulates reopen in South Africa, at the moment they closed all of the consulates. When they reopen, we are able to do new visa applications via proxy, so we won't have to have the crew member fly back, which is great. So we'll actually be able to do the visa while the crew member stays safe on the boat and not have to do unnecessary travel. That is for France and Italy. And Spain, we don't know 100% if they're going to stick to that, but so far France and Italy 100% fine. And Greece said that they would consider it, but they want to wait until they reopen. Right. Somebody asked on the chat what I suggest for crew that with the terrible South African Rand exchange rate. Tristan, I will respond to that privately. I know the exchange rate is awful at the moment, so we all have to do what we can. Internal EU travel, I think we covered. Oh, tomorrow I have to post a poll on the South African Yachties group just to ask how many South Africans are actually stuck in South Africa and not able to get back to their groups, back to their boats. If everybody could participate in that poll, it would really help me out with the government. They've asked me to please make sure that I get some solid numbers of people that are stuck in the country that need to leave. So if people could please get onto that, that would be great. There is a South African flight that will leave from an SAA flight. It leaves from South Africa to the UK on Tuesday or Monday next week, from South Africa to the UK to fetch South African citizens stuck in the UK and then back to South Africa. That flight is not yet full for the flight going to the UK. So if it's a crew member that is South African but they have a British passport, there could be a way that they could get onto that flight. So if you guys want info on that, I will pass on the woman's details with pleasure. That's arranging all of those flights internally. And another thing to note, I spoke with another agent the other day, and she had a captain that needed to fly from Australia into Nice airport, and he wasn't allowed entry into the airport, into Nice, because his visa expired 4 days after arrival, and they are only accepting people with visas expiring a minimum of 10 days before arrival. So this guy wasn't Australian, he was South African, but so obviously needed the Schengen visa, and they denied his entry. Luckily, he found that out before he left. And that is pretty much what I've got on my list of what to discuss. But if anybody needs any assistance, we're here to help. And I absolutely agree that if you're in Spain, get hold of BWA for, we use them a lot for our crew on that side. And we've got agents in Italy that we use as well. So we're happy to point you in the right direction if you're not sure who to speak to.
Well, thank you, Sam. And again, I think some of the stuff that you've said there definitely echoes that we are certainly in, we're in unprecedented times at the moment. And I think a lot of people are definitely, struggling to move, to continue with their daily lives and to work. So thank you for that. Sorry, Caitlin. So we will move on to you now. Caitlin's the last panelist of our webinar today, and then we'll move on to our questions. Caitlin, can you quickly just tell us, obviously it's a really difficult time for seafarers and crew at the moment. I think a lot of people have uncertainty about their income. They might be stuck in quarantine in foreign countries, stuck in lockdown in foreign countries, or stuck on vessels. And I think, obviously mental health and well-being is definitely an issue that, I think is a concern globally at the moment. But I think particularly for seafarers who might be away from friends and family who might not be getting support. Obviously, Iswan is a great organization offering support to crew worldwide. So wherever you are, Iswan's available to you. Caitlin, can you just tell us a little bit more about the support that you've been offering for crew at the moment and sort of ongoing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. The support that we're offering Super Yacht crew, it predominantly comes from our helpline, Seafarer Help, which is a 24-hour multilingual helpline. All of the helpline operators are intensively trained in offering emotional support, suicide risk assessment, counselling skills, and various associated training. At the moment, we're really dealing with a massive increase in cases related to coronavirus, and a lot of them sort of mental health concerns in terms of that might be mild, in just general worries about family back home, or indeed family of seafarers being concerned about them. When it comes to yacht crew specifically, we've had 70 kind of cases that we're aware of. I say that because the helpline's confidential, so we would never press anyone for any particular information. Sometimes seafarers call us and they just want to talk, and they don't even want to be as specific as the sector that they're working in. But we know that we've had 70-ish cases, and we're seeing a lot of concerns, as you rightly said, around kind of financial concerns, worries about employment. That's coming up a lot. I mean, more specifically, I think the biggest concern, or people calling us about, early dismissal and their contracts being cancelled. Unpaid wages has come up, as it does generally, and that's something that we're very used to seeing from seafarers of all sectors. But I think specifically related to coronavirus, also there's a massive issue with seafarers all over the world having their salaries cut unexpectedly, where some owners are prepared to pay a percentage even if they can't board, but that's still an issue. So that those financial worries, they phone sometimes just to talk through the issue, but sometimes because they want practical advice. There's, as we've sort of been talking about, there's lots of issues being able to join the ship in the first place, issues with being stranded and repatriation. And then there are kind of more general health anxieties, as you might expect. We've had calls from crew who are very worried about going to collect passengers from countries where there have been very large outbreaks. That was probably more of a concern earlier on, but it is still obviously a genuine concern of crew. And then we're offering a lot of emotional support because of an increased number of cases that are generally related to mental health issues, a lot more stress and anxiety than we may usually see. And so we're supporting crew through that, and just to say that all of the financial issues that come up, or any employment related issues, always will cause stress, or likely to cause stress and anxiety. So that's something that our helpline operators will always support crew with, and offer that support regardless of the help that they want. Sometimes crew call us and they're very clear on what they want us to do, or what they think we might be able to help with, and sometimes they just want to talk through the problem and get help that way.
Great, thanks Caitlin. I think I think just to echo what you're saying, I think if you know of someone, or you are stuck in a difficult situation and you need support, I think obviously Iswan is a great organization to reach out to, but obviously reach out to the PYA as well. We are connected with a lot of professionals in the industry. If you're struggling in any way, I think it's always good to reach out for support, no matter what what you're going through. And I think there's a lot of organizations within the yachting and the global seafarer community that can assist people that are in need or in trouble. So yeah, definitely, you know, worth getting in touch. Great. So I think, I know we're running late on time, so I'll move quickly on to our questions. Hopefully everyone can see the results of the poll. So I think some of the answers are quite interesting there, and I can run through those at the end. Do any of our panelists want to answer one or two of the questions that they've seen come through in the chat? Can you see those, or do you want me to run through some of them? So I know one question has come through right now for Yann, just with regards to non-EU crew passport or non-EU passport holders being able to enter France to rejoin their vessel. The question says here, I see presently sailors are allowed to enter, however, I'm unsure if this includes yacht crew.
Yeah, they can definitely get in. I mean, as far as you get a Schengen visa, it's just that the procedure is a bit more complex. I mean, you need more documents. As I was mentioning, you need the French movement form, and you need to have a seafarer tickets. But basically, I mean, you can join the boat if you have all the necessary documents in hand. The thing is that it's very important also that you have an employment contract, because as far as we understood, I mean, if you don't have a contract, you cannot join, and you cannot come into the country just to find one. So yeah, basically even now, if I think it's Jessica, if you are looking to join your boat, just get in touch with us and we will send you all the documents and paperwork that need to be validated and filled, and we'll try to make sure that you can join your boat.
Great, thank you. I mean, I think we've answered a lot of the questions that have come up in the chat. I think the last, I just wanted to end off on some sort of last thoughts and sort of what we might be thinking over the next couple of weeks before we host another webinar again. And that's just around, you know, I think in our poll, we asked the question of, have you, so if you're on a vessel at the moment, has your vessel implemented any new health and safety measures? So I think the most popular answer there, 32% of people said, you know, they have to stay in quarantine before joining. So I think that seems to certainly be something that a lot of crew are going to be, you know, experiencing. But then also I think a lot of people are unsure of the health and safety measures that they need to be implemented, especially as we move into the phase where lockdown is eased. So I think that's something we'll probably be looking into over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we can provide a little bit more clarification as the you know, as regulations are released, exactly what yacht crew need to do, you know, to take on board in terms of ensuring that they can keep up with not only the health and safety regulations of the port that they're in, or the waters that they're in, but I think just general for the health and safety of crew in general. I think it's important to be aware of what the regulations are, to make sure that, you know, you keep safe and take care during these unprecedented times. I don't know if any of our panelists wanted to end with a final thoughts or word based on some of the discussion.
I just saw a question now about repatriation, and I just wanted to mention that they said that some South Africans are stuck in the Middle East, and SAA Airlines is doing repatriation flights. So they have a form that they're putting on their websites that you fill in, and the latest flights I think was USA to SA, Thailand, Bali, and I think there was a Middle East flight as well. And they are trying to get their numbers to know if they can facilitate those flights. So if anybody is stuck somewhere, they need to look on the SAA Airlines website or Facebook page and then fill in those repatriation flight request forms.
Great, thank you.
Just from me, Stacey, just to really play, great, many thanks for all the questions. I've been looking at some of the chat stuff coming through. Anybody who's watching, anybody who's not watching, should just send the message. Please send in any of your questions and guide us into the areas where you have got particular interest, so that we can respond to it either through our media or in subsequent webinars. So yeah, please communicate, because we're sort of looking one direction. There may be something we're missing, and we can try and deal with it and ask some leading questions to the right people at the time. Just on that, we're hoping, aspirationally hoping at the moment, to try and put together a sort of sea changes webinar with the MCA and with the regulators So watch this space. That should be coming up next month.
Definitely. Thank you, Andy. Was there any other last thoughts from anybody?
Just on the certification side, if I'd just like to draw people's attention to MIN 611. If you type that into Google, it'll take you to a Maritime and Coast Guard Agency M notice. And at the bottom of that M notice is a link to the latest guidance. And there's guidance on COVID-19 and all sorts of other stuff in there. And the MCA attempt to keep that guidance page up to date. So if you go to MIN 611, click on the link at the bottom, you'll get the latest guidance from the MCA on things like refreshers and anything else to do with the current situation.
Great. Thanks, John. I think just the last word to end off before we end our webinar. Obviously, thank you to everyone who's joining. We'll definitely be doing our best to keep up with all the information and the regulations as they release day by day, and communicating with our members and obviously the wider crew network. But I think that the main thing is, I think everything, hopefully everything is moving in a slightly positive direction as we move forward. But I think at the moment we're still playing the waiting game. So hopefully, but when the dates of lockdown start to ease in some of the major ports, Spain, Italy, France, hopefully we start seeing the industry slowly start reawakening again, and we can provide some more positive updates then. Great. Okay, thank you very much everyone for joining, and hopefully we can get back to anyone who's got questions that weren't answered after the webinar. Feel free to send anything that wasn't answered to info@pya.org. And for anybody who would like to become a PYA member, we've got a special discount. If you sign up on our website and just put in the code WEB20, you'll get a 20% discount for a year of PYA membership. Thank you very much, guys. And yeah, hopefully speak to you all soon when we have another webinar.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.